It's time to be woke, take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke, cause the wicked hide behind the cloak, and if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked, so listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog, cause there's a difference when you breathe it in, so don't let the corporate media take you for a spin, this that morning show, they put you in the know, so I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, 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 yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the song, we out here, yeah. Speeding the fact.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is Monday morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We have a kind of a roundup show for you with a lot of things to discuss. We want to continue a bit of a conversation from our last show when we had an interview that had the chats abuzz, and that was it was interesting, and I think that needs a little further more discussion on that. Kerri and I are going to get to that in a bit. We also got all kinds of good stuff for you, and at this point I think it's a good time to introduce my lovely and talented co-host, Miss Kerri Barber. Good morning, Kerri.
Good morning, Andy. Welcome to Monday, and welcome everybody who's joining us this morning. We so appreciate you being part of the conversation. So keep it civil, and we lean in towards facts here on this particular program. So we don't care what your political ideology is, where you're coming from, none whatsoever. We just want to have a family conversation. We want to keep it grounded in facts and reality so that we can help each other and, discuss. So you make a big part of this program through the comments, questions, and information that you share. So please feel free to drop in the chat. We do see those. We will respond to them. And again, it's a community conversation. So thank you, everybody, for joining, especially those from the Fred Hampton Leftist Network, House of Public Discourse, and all of our syndicated channels. Thank you. So yeah, we've got a lot to get into, but Andy, I'm going to defer to you first. You had some comments that you wanted to share as a follow-up.
Yeah, we're talking on Friday, and I think that the discourse that was happening in the chat, if you didn't catch Friday's show, I'm blanking. What was our guest's name again? Jesus.
Alex Khalil.
Alex, there you go. Yeah. And she's running for Congress, she's running for Senate, isn't she? No, I can't remember. It's been a good weekend, because you can tell it's been a great weekend. But I think a lot of the reason why there was quite a bit of chatter going on in our chat was because I think a lot of people were hearing red flags in terms of talking points for a candidate. And I just thought that it might be prudent for us to discuss that based on what we heard. And I think a lot of people, when they heard discussions about, running as a Democrat or being, I guess what you would say, kind of, almost like a place where the Democrats, I'm just going to go in there and change them, kind of like the same thing, because a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with right now, of course, is, the quote unquote progressives that have won in different spots and gotten into Congress, AKA, AOC, Cori Bush, and all the things that are happening with them currently, is that I think this once bitten, twice shy thing is happening now. There's really going to be a microscope on top of these candidates that call themselves progressive and say, okay, look, you're talking a good game, I can see where you're coming from, and you've got a lot of good policy positions. But is this just a point where this is just going to be another quote unquote progressive gobbled up by the establishment once they come into power? And I wondered if that was, a lot of the trepidation that our viewers were seeing. How do you feel about that, Kerri?
Well, I've said it before that my biggest disappointment with some of the squad members, and I know people are going to come at me for this one, but movement, then maybe even Pelosi or other figures, because how will you know when a true progressive comes up? That one person who is not concerned about being reelected for a second term, who's there to kind of storm the gates and then bring the next person up behind them. So, for example, if I'm running for office and I'm there to bring the ruckus and actually bring attention to these, the biggest lie of my lifetime, the deficit myth, not the book, the actual thing. The book is great. But if I'm there to call attention to that, and I'm tapping the person behind me to help them win my seat because I don't care about getting reelected, how are you going to know the difference between what I say and somebody who is just largely performative with the words? And this is part of my big disappointment with some of the squad members, because we believed that, and then something happened, and then we keep getting told, have faith in the plan, trust the plan. What fucking plan? What plan? Is it die quietly? Because I'm not with that plan. So yeah, this is why, and I very rarely do I give our guests questions in advance, because I want it to be off the cuff. But I did with Alex, and I did tell her, I said, look, I'm going to pose this question. Why should we believe you when we have all of these examples that are disappointing? And I say disappointing, and what I really mean is shocking in the face of what's going on right now with people suffering and dying needlessly. So I don't want to underplay that. It's just Monday morning. Nobody wants to hear me screaming out. so yeah, those are my thoughts on it. If you're gonna come, you got to come correct, absolutely, or nobody's gonna really bother to get up off their butts and vote. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. Yeah, I think that with me, and it's granted, it's a little bit difficult for me because I'm not American, right? I'm not in that system. But if I was, I would think, okay, it sounds like, your head's in the right space in terms of progressive policies. That's cool. But when I listen to the methods that you're describing and how, well, I'm just going to go in there and change things, or, it doesn't matter. We shouldn't talk about politics, or you have to go into that system, whether you like that system or not. It exists, right? So you have to go into that lion's den, right? We're still in a neoliberal regime where big money owns everything, right? And you have to operate within that system. But going in there and saying that, okay, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and they're just waiting there, to swallow you whole into the, the mama bear Nancy Pelosi. You just sit there and wait your turn, and we'll tell you when you can talk. That I think that's where a lot of people's activism is coming from now. Is we're trying to hold these people's feet to the fire. They're not doing what they said they were going to do. We're basically trying. They say they have an extra plan. They're not going with it. They're not telling us about it. We're sitting here in the dark. What was the use of it of electing these people if they're not going to work for us either, right? And I think that just creates this trepidation of, okay, well, tell me, do you have a plan? Do you know how things work? Are you up on all of this, right? And I think that's going to be the litmus test on the progressive left now, because there's been so much disappointment with the people we've already sent there, right?
Right. Okay, so I want to award a gold star that we don't actually have to Optimism of the Will. Good morning. Optimism saw the show on Friday and knew that she was running for Senate. So thank you so much for watching and for paying attention. Thank you. We appreciate it, because I know we cover a lot of stuff that's pretty heavy and very complex, and we try to do it in a simplified way. So sometimes it's a challenge. So I appreciate it. And thank you, Rebecca Schmalls. She said, thank you for doing this on line 3. So yeah, so before we get to line 3, I just want to do a touch on some things that happened this weekend when it came to eviction moratorium. And Andy, I think this ties into your critique of the particular candidate.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about the eviction moratorium. So the congressional portion of it expired. Congress went home. Representative Cori Bush did a sit-in on the Capitol steps to bring awareness to it. And at the same time, several federal organizations, including HUD, extended the eviction moratorium to September. Well, that's great. However, money matters in this. So if HUD puts out a statement that we are going to extend the moratoriums, okay, now you got to bring something with it. This is part of that coming correct. So the Fed has the HUD, Department of Housing Resources, has no money to give to renters or the mortgagees. So if I buy an apartment building, let's say a small 4-unit apartment building, I hold a mortgage on that, and I've got to make payments, property taxes, everything else. That eviction moratorium is nice, but what am I supposed to do with this mortgage that I got to pay when renters aren't paying? So this is where the money piece comes in. If Congress does not act on this, there is no hope of money piece happening. So we have this policy out there, and me as a renter, we've seen this all across the country. States are still evicting people left and right. It's happening all over the place. In fact, there's one gentleman on Twitter who works with Section 8 and a bunch of other families. He said that the sheriff's office has already issued 500 notices of eviction in Georgia. So while the HUD can put this out and say that we've extended it, what happens between the renter and the mortgage holder? Because we know that even today, the mortgagee, the company, the bank that wrote the mortgage, they're going to get paid. But now it leaves the struggle between the renter and the landlord. What do you do? So this is something I'm watching carefully, and I'm a cynic. I know I'm a cynic. So when I saw Cori out there, for a moment I was like, oh, what is this? Is this really going to help? But no. And then you saw Elizabeth Warren trot out there for a photo op and then go home, and I just please be about the business of helping people, and that means money. Money has to flow from the Fed to the states and to be distributed to the renters and the people who hold the mortgage, the landlord. Otherwise, it's me fighting my landlord. And guess who loses? I'm going to be out on the street anyway. So,
right. This is all just kicking the can down the road, right? It's, it's going to end up just ending badly anyways. And we just keep pushing it. But that money is still owed. And, most Americans don't have it. They're not going to magically make up the difference between now and Labor Day. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'm keeping an eye on that one, and I know a lot of other folks are talking about it and are happy, unhappy, whatever. But it's a developing story to me, not just on the legislative front, but it's a people's story. These are families. during COVID and Delta rising and all of these other things. So yeah, I didn't want to get away from a Monday morning without at least mentioning it. So, all right. So our big story today, line 3. And before we get started, I do want to lean into being a good ally. And I am by no means an authority on everything that's going on. So in the chat, I have posted links to the people who are authorities on this. And I want to continue to point you to them. And I would ask that you bookmark their sites, subscribe, follow them, get the information from them. And in particular, I want to give a thank you to Winona LaDuke and the Honor the Earth. This is they have a YouTube channel and a couple other things. So it's Honor the Earth. And I honestly think this is where you should be getting your first line source of information from the Indigenous folks that are on the ground, as well as experts like Winona LaDuke has been doing this forever. And there are a couple other resources that I wanted to give you as we go throughout this program. So I am not sitting here as an expert. I am just elevating this information. I hope that you will share credible information in the chat so that we can all get on the same page, because what's going on with Embridge, this is really complex. It's not just about the pipeline. There's some other things going on here that we all need to be aware of and set the foundation for it. So, all right. First things first. So, what is line 3? And I am not going to do as good of an example, an introductory piece, as Winona LaDuke did. She's got a two-minute video. It's about 2 minutes 46 seconds on YouTube. And I want you to go and see that, because what she does is she not only breaks it down what this is, but it's essentially Pipeline 3 was already in existence. And this is from Embridge, one of the companies that was building pipelines for Canadian tar sands to be shipped across the United States, down to be processed, not even really in the United States, but to be sold overseas. So the U.S., being as it is, capitalist end stage addicts, we decided, yeah, you can take this stuff through the United States, even though we don't really get the benefit of it. Our people don't get to use this resource, and it just causes risk to our waterways, to our farmlands, to our people. Yeah, sure, come on in, because we don't give a shit about our own people. We just want to see that you get your profits. So line 3 was already a thing, except line 3 has been leaking, it's decrepit, and Winona does this beautiful job of cataloging all the risks from the existing pipeline that Embridge just wants to walk away from, and is building this number 3. So for the detractors out there, when they say Embridge just doesn't want to walk away from it, they have pledged to, okay, here's the thing. I went back and looked at consent decrees between the United States Environmental Protection Agency and Embridge, this company. There are multiple. So for those of you who are not familiar with what a consent decree is, a consent decree is when an agency or other takes a company to court for detriment, harm, all of these things that hurt people. Then there's a consent decree, and this is a judge's order that this company must conform to a remediation plan and get their shit together. So we can see this in health companies. If you have, a recall on a product, that's generally done through a consent decree, or the company might do it on their own, but then enter into a consent decree. We also see this with multiple city police departments. When they have been found in the wrong through their process or what they've done on civil rights, the Department of Justice can force them into a consent decree and have a remediation plan. So Embridge was forced into a remediation plan multiple times. The most recent was in 2016. So this is a company that's not necessarily a good faith actor, but yet here they are with multiple projects all throughout the United States. So what I find interesting is Pipeline 5 runs from the UP of Michigan down to the Mitten. They've got pipelines all over the Great Lakes. And oh, by the way, the Great Lakes is the largest freshwater body in the world, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
So, yeah, multiple millions of people get their water from the Great Lakes. So here's Embridge doing whatever they want to do underneath the Great Lakes. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing.
Right? So, yeah, exactly. So, Pipeline 3 is the project to abandon the old crappy pipeline that has been leaking like crazy and just build a brand new one. Just a brand new one, like abandoning a strip mall that's leaking toxic waste and just building a brand new one a couple miles away. So this is what's happening. Here's the problem. They're going through the land of sovereign indigenous nations. So for those who are not up on what a sovereign indigenous nation is, through Article 6 of the US Constitution, we recognize First Nations as sovereign nations. This is why if you drive past a Pueblo or other indigenous area, they have their own police force, they have all of the things themselves, and we have treaties as sovereign nations. So think of them as small enclaves within the United States. I call your attention to a judge's ruling last year in Oklahoma that was leaning into returning land to the First Nations in Oklahoma and ruled in their favor on a couple different issues. So we're starting to see more and more leaning into what we said we were going to do under Article 6. So if that's the case, my first question was, how is this happening with line 3? It didn't make any sense to me. If Article 6 of the US Constitution is a thing, and it is, what are they doing? So, Andy, this is the first graphic, Constitution of the United States of America, and I'm going to read it, and then we'll walk through it a little bit. So this is from Article 6. It says, all debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid as the United States under the Constitution as under the Confederation. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws or of any state of the country notwithstanding. So this is Article 6. And when I mentioned the ruling by the judge in Oklahoma, he cited this. So why then are we going through First Nation lands if this is the case? So I looked it up because that's what I do. So here's where it gets a little weird, and this is where the constitutionalists and other people really have found a loophole, and they're exploiting it. And so I found this under Cornell law, and what they have done is the Indian treaties they have maintained are a closed account, because that section in Article 6 that said any agreements that have already been made must be honored. So what happened in the 1700s, late 1700s, is they were not recognizing First Nations. And there's a law on the books that says, this is the Indian Appropriation Act of 1871. It says that provided hereafter no Indian nation or tribe within the territory of the United States shall be acknowledged or recognized as an independent nation, tribe, or power within the United States. So did you catch that? So in 1871, we said we're not going to recognize them. And it was just this little bill that went out there. And that was the core of Manifest Destiny. So as colonizers are rolling across the country, They're using the religious idea of manifest destiny. It is our divine right to do this. And so this is where the Indian treaties came from. They said, no, we don't recognize them. We are the supreme power. We're going to go through it. And it was largely quiet. And then we had Article 6 of the US Constitution come out that said all treaties here, whatever, we will honor them. So they created this nice legal loophole that has been exploited for over 100 years by capitalists. So there's a movie coming out where I believe it was Oklahoma, or I think it was Oklahoma, where they had lawyers make themselves guardians over indigenous people when they found oil on indigenous lands. So what the lawyers did is decided, well, this indigenous person is not really a person, but I am, because I'm a white person and a lawyer and I own property. So I'm going to make myself a guardian of this indigenous person, and I'm going to sell their oil rights out from under them and do everything I possibly can. And oh, damn, my guardian died. That sucks. I'll go get another one. So there's actually a movie coming out about all of this, how this works. And this hasn't stopped to the present day.
Right.
So I just want everyone to understand, how do we get around Article 6? Well, this is the Indian treaties, and that's exactly what they're doing. So everybody on board? Andy, clear as mud?
Got it.
Makes sense?
Yep. We're flying along, Kerri. Keep going.
Okay. All right. So the bottom line is we suck. So yeah. So that is how they are legally doing this with Embridge, because the federal government is saying that we have the power over these lands, even though we sort of recognize them as sovereign nations. We don't really when it comes to commerce. And oh, by the way, the Indian Treaties ruling of 1871. That's how Embridge is getting away with this. So when you have a corporation coming through indigenous lands, and you have U.S. sheriff's departments acting as their own private guard, like the Pinkertons, this is how they are legally allowed to do it. So one of the things I want to call your attention to is, oh, by the way, there's a severe drought going on over much of the United States. And Minnesota is one of them, one of the places where it's happening. So when I looked up the states, and this is not just the northern portions of the United States, this is part of Canada too, where all of that heat wave is going through. So both Canada and the United States are experiencing a severe drought in this particular area. And in Minnesota alone, 90% of the state is under extreme to severe drought levels. Why am I bringing this up? Well, because Embridge needs water to do their construction. And they're also going to use water in the main maintenance and facilitation of this pipeline. So I know that Canada is talking about restricting their water rights, but Minnesota has not. And right now, if you go out and look at Minnesota, they're talking about White Bear Lake and all of these reservoirs who are at extremely low levels, but those are the same areas where Embridge is taking millions of gallons per day just for this project. Now, they're not on the level as Nestle, where Nestle's at millions of gallons per minute, but it's still something worth considering, right? So, Andy, if you wouldn't mind, please, sir, this next graphic, because I really want to drive this point home about, so this is the plan for line 3 versus North American aquifers. And this is where it gets really terrifying to me. And I don't know if our audience is aware of this, but so you have the Great Lakes area where millions of people draw their water. That's business, commerce, families, everybody. The rest of the nation, we get it from aquifers. So when you have reservoirs and other things, these are dams generally over major waterways that sit on top of aquifers. Mississippi River, the Rio Grande, all of these that deliver millions of people's water so that you need that to live. So here at the top graphic, maybe a little hard to read, but this is the pipeline plan for line 3, this new one. Never mind the old one that's still sitting there rotting away and leaking. And I just did a blow up of where those aquifers are. So if you see in blue, those are aquifers. Blue in this graphic at the bottom does not indicate that those aquifers are healthy and recharged. What I would invite you to do is go and look at your state's aquifer, and the government monitors the levels. I can tell you right now from living in Illinois and from looking at aquifers in this particular region, they're red. They're at critical levels because climate change, by the way, when the rain comes down really hard, aquifers don't recharge because the volume and velocity of the water is such that it's just going down the tributaries and into the rivers. It is not leaching into the ground like it had to recharge those aquifers. So for those of you who live in apartments or homes or things like that, what is it worth to you if you have no water? I talked about this in Oregon where wells were going dry. Their aquifers hadn't been charging for years. Nobody told them. So here I'm telling you, in this particular region where pipeline 3 is going through, these aquifers are not recharging. So the water mandates that we're seeing in the West, you're going to start to see them too. And in Minnesota, they're already talking about water shortages and limiting how much water you can do. Those are, you can't water your lawn, all of those sorts of programs that local governments implement. You're going to start to see those coming next month from Minnesota. They're already talking about it in Minneapolis and in other parts of the state. So now why would you put another pipeline that risks those aquifers throughout that entire region? That seems crazy to me. I'm going to pause here for a moment because I need to breathe. But,
well, you're right, 100%. But why would Embridge put, people's futures on the line like that? And of course, the answer is profit.
Well, here's the crazy thing, and a shout out to Stop Line 3 folks, because they put this right on their site and they called it out. There was a notice of divestiture on all of these programs, including Embridge and the tar sands. So let's back up. Divestiture. If I own a big bank and I want to make money and I invest in these programs, one of them would be oil and gas because that is the fastest way to make some money. So that is what was happening. And this is the Canadian government, private entities, US government, private entities. All of these folks got in and were investing in these programs. There was just an announcement by the Canadian government where they were divesting, moving away from, selling their assets, getting out of this business to the tune of billions. That was last week. So now we have the whole profit motive slipping away. So why the hell then are we still doing this? Is it to create the 150 jobs? 150 jobs? I mean, it makes no sense. So this is one of the other points that I really want to help drive home. And again, Stop Line 3, follow them. Follow them. It's stopline3.org. O-R-G. So go out there. They've got all this great information and things like that. So yeah, shout out to them for all of it. So the last part I want to get to, and this is where it gets a little complex, not that it hasn't already, but kind of a timeline. And there's some extra pieces that we need to talk about in here when it comes to not just the toxicity and risk to our waterways, but also to people. So Andy, please, if you would, the timeline and the updates graphic.
Okay.
So on this one, I mentioned the 2016 EPA Consent Decree, and that was a settlement over massive spills. So this one company alone has multiple infractions. They've had to be held to account by the federal government, which is the job of the federal government to do. We've seen them back off quite a bit. on holding companies accountable for our benefit, but this is one where they actually did it in 2016. And it was not the first time. So if you look up this company, Embridge, and the number of citations and oil spills and leaks, it's just, it's insanity, absolute insanity. So I put that out there. You can go and look at this consent decree. It is part of your free speech, First Amendment rights to read these consent decrees and the remediation plans by these companies. They're still working on this, by the way, still working on it. January 28th, 2019. This is a part that I think we don't talk about enough, and one that I really want to dig into and elevate those people who are bringing attention to it. So Amnesty International, as well as other humanitarian groups, have been studying the phenomenon of work camps. These are remote camps where a company will create, think of like Hershey, Pennsylvania, where they have bunk houses and food and all of these things. And you, if you are an employee of this company, you go to this remote work site and you may stay there for 6 months or more working on this project. These are typically used in energy development projects. And one of the places that they studied were in remote areas of northern Canada. So yeah, it was British Columbia and other types of remote areas to either do excavation work, pull up oil and other types of resources, or to invest in bringing power to that area. So in these work camps, they noticed an interesting phenomenon where Indigenous women were not just being abused, beaten, and raped, but they were disappearing. And so we've heard kind of rumbles of where are the Indigenous women? They're disappearing at alarming rates. And Amnesty International had been studying since 2016 that these remote work camps, that they believe there was no coincidence, that you had a high level of Indigenous women from the area disappearing and these work camps. And they put that report together in 2016, and I did include a link to it. It's horrific. And then they just updated again in 2019, looking at companies like Embridge and what is happening. So what I thought was interesting is there is a direct tie between this study and the Embridge Corporation itself. You had 4 employees on line 3, 4 of them caught up in a sex trafficking sting. They were arrested, and of course they were fired, but this is something that we really need to take a look at. Where are these women? So this is a critical issue, and nobody's talking about it. And I remember last week I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, helping me pull this information together. And I remember in Chicago, there were 50 Black women who disappeared in the summer. 50 in a major metropolitan area in a city like Chicago. How do 50 Black women just suddenly disappear? And one of the things that came out was there was an active duty police officer and a couple others who were then picked up in a sex trafficking sting. So I really want to call your attention to these. These are not coincidental episodes. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it without actually doing a full-throated, damn it, we need to pay attention here, because it's happening. It's absolutely happening. We have arrests and other things to point to on this one. So if you have more information on the missing women, the abuse, the allegations, all of those lawsuits, please drop it in the chat. Please do. There's very little information out there right now. So if you have information, you have witnesses or things that you believe are credible, please put it in the chat, because we need to elevate this particular portion of the conversation. So it's not just environmental concerns, the plague of late stage capitalism, but it's also people. These are moms, aunts, daughters, cousins. They matter. They absolutely matter. So I want to put that out there.
Well,
and then
Kerri,
one other organization.
sorry, just wanted to interrupt quickly. Optimism of the will just put in the chat that building pipelines, as the fossil fuel industry dies, might as well build a business to harvest dodo eggs.
Okay, I like it. I like it. It's snarky and fun.
That was pretty good. That was for Monday.
That was
a perfect level of snark.
It was gentle. It was a gentle jab. So thank you, Optimism. I appreciate that. And then yeah, also says all those black kids that disappeared in Atlanta in the 80s. Yeah, well, what? Right? How does this even happen? How does it happen? Well, I'm working on a story for Fred Hampton's Leftist where I actually talk about that a little bit, why this is happening. And of course, it goes back to profit. It's a trillion with a T, $1 trillion industry, buying and selling of human bodies for the sex trafficking industry. So that's why it's happening. But in this particular context, I felt it too important not to cover that aspect of it, because it is a component of what's going on, right? This is your lesser and greater evil all together in one story. So then getting back to the legal aspect of it, there were a couple of things that happened last week where you had 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So we heard that some Canadian government, local municipalities, were going to rescind the water usage rights for Embridge for this particular project. However, in Minnesota, the state appeals court upheld the ruling on behalf of Embridge for the Line 3 oil pipeline. This was, when you're a water protector, you try to find every avenue. And even if that means death by 1,000 cuts, like repealing their permit or challenging how the permit went down. And in Minnesota, this was a committee decision. So here's my rant for those of you who say, check out of politics. These people were elected to that committee. It was not an appointment. They were elected. So if you're in Minnesota and you're upset about Line 3, you need to go back and look at who was on this committee, why they made that decision, and maybe should you replace them with someone else. Local elections matter. Everybody say it. Local elections matter. So particularly for our water protectors, they know this. So they were trying every avenue they could get to start pulling apart this project, because the federal government is not going to do it. So they were doing it. And they had this court challenge, and there was a lot of optimism, but on the 14th, this appeals court ruled in favor of the law. So it wasn't necessarily the judges. They have to go by what the law says, what it is. And this judge panel said, yeah, the statutes, they followed the statutes. So you in Minnesota need to change the statutes. You do that through ballot access petitions. You do that through local and state referendums, and you do that through local elections. Okay, so if you're in Minnesota, Illinois, any of these states that are affected by this particular project and this company, that's where you want to look. So yeah, and then on July 19th, Winona LaDuke and others were arrested, and they have these beautiful photographs of water protectors and allies standing in unity. And it's, to me, those are photographs of what the United States could be and should be, because you see all manner of people representing different cultures standing together for the benefit of each other. So that again is on stopline3.org. Please go take a look and read this story about when Winona LaDuke and others being arrested. They have since been released and have pledged to continue the fight. So then on July 28th, I mentioned again the 4 oil pipeline workers who are linked to sex trafficking in Minnesota. So this is not over. There are more investigations. There are water protectors who are missing, and again, the Indigenous women from the area who are missing. All of these things play into this particular project. It's just a massive blight on almost every aspect of human existence. And then the big one, this came out in April, and then The Intercept followed up with it with a recent report last week. So the Minnesota Police Department, most states, your police department gets their money through the state that is funneled down to the county. And your local police department at your county level, your sheriff, whatever, you get a bucket of money as determined by your local county board. If it's at a state level, then it's your state legislature who determines how much money they get. Well, we have been whittling back state budgets for decades. So, of course, if you are in the police force and you need new equipment, or let's say you want to partake of military style equipment, you need some money. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to have ticket quotas. You're going to have red light cameras. You're going to have seizure programs, asset seizure and forfeiture programs, which last year the United States police departments took more property, seized more assets from average citizens for various reasons, far more than petty theft and other crime committed by private citizens. So this is what we have pushed them to do. Not saying that they're right, not saying they're justified, but cause and effect here. So the Minnesota Police Department expected $500,000 as part of the Embridge Line 3 program and the grants and subsidies that were coming towards this program, and they were going to use it to supplement their budget and buy new weapons. So they have basically become a private security force for Embridge in a quasi-governmental fashion. So I would love to have a legal expert weigh in on that, because I believe that is a violation of due process, equal protection, and various other constitutional civil rights in this respect. So if you have an attorney friend or a resource, I think that would be a worthwhile share. So yeah, Pinkertons are alive and well in 2021, particularly when it comes to oil and gas. So yeah, and that is the gist of, I went through all of this really quickly, but I want to post these links again to the folks and organizations that I believe you should be following if you aren't already. And I am asking you to share with family and friends, because part of how we overcome things like, corporate media really not talking about this is you and I talk about it. And I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to these particular folks and make sure that all of your friends and family are as well. So any questions, Andy? I went through all of this really quickly.
No, it's very well done, Kerri. As always, thank you so much for your due diligence and reporting and doing your investigative journalism. It's amazing, and it makes me look good. So thank you.
Well, that's really what matters.
Yeah, but what was gonna say is, we like to think that we live in a world where people are waking up to the reality, and they're trying to maybe successfully, maybe unsuccessfully, start to critically think about their own place in the oligarchy that most Americans live in. And we look back at the time period and when DAPL actually happened and what was going on, and who was actually reporting on it and getting the real story. And then we look at this, that's happening now, and ask ourselves, what's changed? Right? And it's still the same, right? It's par for the course, right? We think that, we're more people are understanding climate change is a problem. We've got, all of the groups, the kids that are all, working towards raising awareness and waking people up for this. And with the exception of last year, because of the pandemic, every year is a brand new record for greenhouse gas emissions into the air. we're talking a good game, but nobody's doing anything about it.
That's exactly right. And yeah. So real quick, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this, but Derek says thank you for drawing attention to this, and then put I'm not sure what language that word is, but I'm hoping that says thank you. I'm like I said, I'm not even going to try it, but Derek, thank you for watching, and please make sure that we keep pushing, particularly our leftist podcasters, leftists or programs like ours that kind of span the political spectrum. We need more people to talk about this. And then the other story that I'm working on is the striking workers in Alabama. These are coal workers, miners, their families, and what's going on. They have been on strike for 4 months, and nobody's talking about it. There's one reporter talking about it, so I've invited her to join our conversation on Wednesday, because she's done another person that's done a phenomenal job, and I don't want to take credit for any of her work, because she's done just amazing, insightful interviews, articles, video, all of this talking about it. And those particular workers and their families are now in New York at the company that they are striking against, and there's some things happening. They're being targeted. Vehicular assault is a thing, apparently, when you have people striking. So regardless of the industry that they represent, these are working people who have a right to strike, who have a right to their grievances. And oh, by the way, Andy, you just mentioned climate change. We're still using coal. We're still using coal and all of these other things. So these workers have a right to continue in safety until we can get them transferred over, maybe through the federal jobs guarantee.
Right.
They still got to eat. They still got to live. So.
Absolutely. By the way, just a quick update. Derek has informed us that Niwikani means water is life.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. I live in New Mexico, and let me tell you, as soon as I wrap up here, I am literally going to go haul water, because without it, I can't survive. So that whole concept going from Chicago, a city set, it was nice. Derek, it sounded beautiful. It made me feel good, but I didn't have to worry about it in Chicago. Here, I have to count gallons. I have to account for everything. I have to recycle water as much as possible. Everything that I use, every product, whatever, has to be non-toxic and biodegradable and good for plants. It has absolutely changed my perspective, and we live by that phrase here personally in my household. And I hope that other people will start to kind of come to that realization too, that it's more than just a phrase. It is a reality. It is life or death. And that is why I at least wanted to touch on this story and bring it to your attention, and hope all I can do is bring it, all Annie can do is bring it, and dad jokes. And it's up to you to do something with it. So thank you.
And sometimes they may even be funny.
I heard some good dad jokes this weekend, but I can't say them on air. They're just too bad. So
there's like old traditional dad jokes.
Right. Yeah, they're very bad. So Wednesday we will have some dad jokes, and please bring your own. So that'll be fun. Let's do it. Let's see. Next time, it would be awesome if you could all touch on how the doctrine of discovery relates to line 3 and other major issues. Did we not? Manifest Destiny does cover the doctrine of discovery, except it just took the religious overtones of it. So maybe you joined us late. I'll take your criticism, but I'm going to say, Adam, maybe you joined us late when I was talking about Manifest Destiny and how the colonization happened and continues to happen. But thank you for that. So yeah. So excellent. B, I agree with you. Water conservation is something everyone needs to adopt, and I agree with you. Like I said, just going from taking a long hot shower to now, I got to make sure that I'm under 3 gallons of water. And what happens to that water after I use it? has been life-changing, and not to put it mildly. But yeah, and these are things that I could have been doing in Chicago and didn't. And now I'm kicking myself. Like I had no idea how simple it really is to go from 3,000 gallons a month down to 1,500 and be able to recycle the majority of it. So yeah, so thank you for that. Okay, that's all I got, Andy. That's all I got. You want to take us out with some Monday wisdom?
No. No, I don't. Don't have it in me, Kerri. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Well, we'll get you back out onto the natures and help you out there camping. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And yes, we will get back on Wednesday, and we're going to talk about the 14th Amendment, my favorite, as well as the striking workers from Alabama, co-workers, and hopefully a little bit of the Green New Deal, which, if you didn't know, came from the Green Party, not the Democratic Party. So let's take a look at what it actually was and what the Biden administration is talking about today. So that'll be Wednesday. Please join us for that. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. And again, thanks, Kerri. And thank you to our viewers and for tuning in. And hopefully you'll join us again. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, and we will see you bright and early here on Wednesday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it in G. Whoa.